Yo, what's good? It is a beautiful day outside, but unfortunately the country is under lockdown, so I snuck outside during the quarantine just to get some fresh air, and it reminded me of just how much fun I have flying my drone every chance I get the opportunity to. I'm gonna go back in my archives and show you 5 tips on how to shoot better drone video no matter your experience level. You ready? Let's go. So 5 tips to improve your drone footage. Well, today is your lucky day because there are actually 6 tips. So make sure you don't miss out on the bonus tip at the end of the video, because I assure you, if you miss it, you will regret it. The first tip is to have a plan. Now I know that sounds pretty simple, like duh, common sense, right? But I can't tell you how many times first-time drone pilots, including myself, get up in the air and lose focus or get distracted because they're flying a new toy. So before you take off, have a plan and know what you want to shoot. And this is for 2 reasons. The first and most important reason is because you want your aerial footage to match the rest of your footage that you've shot with your DSLR or land camera. Remember, a drone is simply a tool to help you get better shots that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to. It's designed to enhance your video or film, kind of like icing on the cake or dressing on a salad, whichever you prefer. The second reason is drone batteries lose charge very quickly, and depending on the type of drone you have, you might be limited to about 15 minutes, which sounds like a lot of time, but realistically, depending on the weather conditions, the distance you intend to go, and the kinds of moves you're performing, that can go by in a jiffy. Not to mention, it's more like 12 to 13 minutes, especially when you factor in that most drones will head back to base with about 2 to 3 minutes of battery life as a fail-safe mechanism. I know what you're thinking, right? Just get spare batteries. Well, let's see what you do when you get around all that fancy equipment. On to tip number 2. Composition is key. Now, some people have a natural eye for where objects should be in the frame, and others don't. If you're totally clueless on how to compose a nice looking shot, always stick to the rule of thirds. That pretty much says, if you put your points of interest or focus on these grid lines or areas, the shot should come out looking pretty sensible. You don't want to shoot a subject where you can barely see them, but you see the entire sky. It just looks imbalanced and unnatural, or having the subject hard to the right of the frame and leaving a lot of awkward and meaningless space to the left. It just confuses the viewer and has them struggling to gain a perspective or a focus point. Remember, keep your subjects on one of these lines or in these general areas, and you should be in pretty good shape. Tip number 3, movement. You see it all the time in movies, and you don't realize it unless your eyes are trained to notice it, but you definitely feel it. Have you ever watched a movie and at a critical juncture the camera is wide, and by the time as the suspense is built up, you're right in the character's face and feeling the tension that they feel? Camera movement is the perfect way to spice up a boring shot. A simple tracking move or slow zoom can set the tone for an epic scene and create intrigue for the viewer. But be careful though, keep your movements smooth, steady, and slow. Quick and jerky movements break the viewer's focus and can ruin what might have otherwise been a really interesting piece. Some of my favorite drone movements are the slow flyover, the tracking shot, and the pullback. But my favorite has to be the big reveal. That's when the camera pedestals up from behind the subject to reveal a bigger landscape or subject. Tip number 4, don't fly too high. Again, most beginner pilots, after they've mastered the basics and gotten over the fear of crashing, have this tendency to fly way up and try to capture as much as they can in the frame at one time. Don't ask me why, it just is what it is. Now, it isn't always a bad idea, but it has its place, and it has to be done correctly. If you're going to shoot like that, you need to have a focus or a subject, and it should show some sort of scale, like a person next to a giant mountain or a car in a huge desert. Something that provides that wow factor. If you're just shooting extremely wide and far away, you kill the emotional appeal by detaching the viewer, not to mention that's just plain boring.
and it also makes your video look less cinematic and very amateur. The closer you get to a subject and the more objects that move in front of the camera in relation to that subject creates a more dramatic effect that draws the viewer in and keeps them hooked for what's coming up next. Alright, tip number 5, which really can be a killer if you don't have them to start with, and those are ND filters. Very simply put, ND filters are sunglasses for your camera. Remember, although your drone is a quadcopter, it is also a camera. So the same things that you do for proper exposure with your DSLR camera are what you need to do with your drone, and maybe even more, because when shooting from the air, the light captured by the camera is much more dynamic and harder to expose for if you don't have an ND filter to balance it out. This tip should actually be number 1, because without an ND filter, depending on the time of day you're shooting, you might not be able to use the footage that you get, and that would really suck. But let's just say you couldn't get around that problem because you just don't have ND filters. What could you do? Well, as mentioned, it is a camera, much like your land camera, so try to shoot at golden hour when the sunlight is a lot less harsh, allowing you to get better looking colors and easier exposure. Now, if you don't know what golden hour is, it's that time early in the morning or late in the evening when the sun isn't so high overhead, and the sun is at a better angle for more flattering photography. The light is gentler, the shadows are softer, and the colors are prettier than they would be at any other time of the day. You've made it all the way to the bonus tip. Go ahead and leave a comment and let me know what you think about this list so far and what you thought the bonus tip might be. So here we go. The bonus tip is to shoot for the future. Sometimes we only get one shot in a location, or we might never have the chance to visit that place again. So we have to maximize every square inch of the opportunity presented to us. The first thing you want to do is shoot clean. Make sure the footage is good and steady. Then get creative with it. And finally, get a variety of shots from different angles doing different movements and compositions. You never know when you might need this footage again and how it's going to be used. So take full advantage so that even if you show that same footage to a person 2 or 3 times, they can never tell that it's the same location, thereby increasing your stock footage for future projects.
These simple principles make all the difference in the world. If you learned something from this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, make sure to share with all your friends. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.